Imagine the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North Atlantic, shimmering under a star-dusted, moonless sky. April 14th, 1912. Aboard the RMS Titanic, the unsinkable marvel of engineering, passengers reveled in unparalleled luxury, blissfully unaware of the icy phantom lurking in the darkness ahead. We think we know this story. The iceberg, the insufficient lifeboats, the tragic loss of over 1,500 souls. But what if a crucial piece of the puzzle, a final, chilling premonition, has been overlooked for more than a century? Welcome, seekers of hidden truths. Prepare yourselves for a journey back to that fateful night, but through a lens rarely examined. We won't just recount the disaster. We'll explore a whisper in the wireless waves, a signal that defies the official logs, a potential omen sent from the heart of the doomed liner before the recognized distress calls began. If you find yourself drawn to the mysteries hidden beneath the surface of history, consider joining our exploration. Subscribe, share this journey, and perhaps comment below with your own thoughts on history's lingering enigmas. You might be surprised by what we uncover together. The airwaves that night were a frantic battleground. The relatively new technology of Marconi wireless telegraphy was both a miracle and a source of chaos. Operators on ships and shore stations strained to decipher messages through static and interference. Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, the Titanic's skilled but overworked Marconi operators, were swamped. Their primary duty wasn't safety communication, but relaying the personal messages of the wealthy first-class passengers, telegrams filled with stock market updates, travel arrangements, and trivial greetings, clogging the precious bandwidth. They had already warned the nearby SS Californian about the presence of ice, only to be curtly rebuffed by an operator overwhelmed by his own traffic. The pressure was immense, the equipment temperamental. Yet, amidst this electronic din, legends persist. Whispers among maritime historians and wireless enthusiasts speak of another signal, not the widely known CQD or SOS distress calls sent after the collision, but something else, something earlier. A message characterized by a strange urgency, a deviation from standard protocols, broadcast in the hours leading up to the fatal encounter. Could it be true? Could the Titanic, or someone aboard her, have sent a warning, a plea, or perhaps something more cryptic that was simply lost in the noise or dismissed as atmospheric distortion? Think about the operators on nearby ships, their ears pressed to headphones, deciphering dots and dashes that painted pictures of distant events. Imagine Cyril Evans on the Californian, the ship closest to the Titanic, the vessel that saw her lights, saw her firing rockets, yet failed to grasp the magnitude of the unfolding disaster. He had shut down his wireless set for the night shortly before the collision, frustrated by the backlog and the Titanic operator's earlier rebuke. But what signals might have crackled before he went off duty? What fragments might have been partially logged, then dismissed? The official inquiries, both British and American, meticulously documented the known wireless traffic. They built a timeline based on the CQD and SOS calls logged by ships like the Carpathia and the Mount Temple. But these inquiries were also conducted under immense public pressure, seeking clear answers and, perhaps, clear culprits. Was there room, within the trauma and the rush to judgment, to consider anomalies that didn't fit the emerging narrative? Anomalies like a phantom signal? The technology was young. Interference was common. Misinterpretation was easy. Yet the persistence of this forgotten signal narrative begs the question: was it merely technical noise, or the ghost of a warning unheard? We delve deeper into the specific nature of this alleged transmission, searching for clues in operator testimonies and forgotten archives. If you've journeyed this far into the mystery, let us know in the comments. Your engagement fuels our quest for answers as we search for what truly transpired in those critical hours. So, what exactly was this phantom signal? Accounts vary, shrouded in the fog of time and the trauma of the event. Unlike the clear, internationally recognized distress calls CQD, come quick, danger, or the new SOS, this alleged earlier transmission is described differently. Some accounts suggest it wasn't a standard distress call at all, but perhaps a series of frantic, non-protocol signals. Imagine Morse code sent not by a seasoned operator following procedure, but perhaps by someone else gaining access to the equipment, someone panicked, someone trying desperately to convey an urgent, specific warning before the fatal impact. Could it have been a message about the sheer density of the ice field they were entering, more severe than previously reported? Or perhaps something even stranger? One persistent, though highly speculative, thread involves not the Titanic's primary Marconi room, but potentially a secondary, lower-powered set, or even experimental equipment being tested. Could a message have been sent on a different frequency, one not typically monitored by commercial traffic? The technology was evolving rapidly. Ships often carried equipment from competing firms or custom modifications. Verifying such a transmission becomes exponentially harder, as logs would likely not exist, or would be scattered across obscure technical journals rather than official maritime records. Think about that for a moment. A cry for help, lost not just in static, but in the labyrinth of incompatible technologies. Consider the atmospheric conditions that night. The North Atlantic in April is notorious for strange electrical phenomena. Auroral activity, though not strongly recorded for that specific night, can play havoc with radio waves. Could intense static or unusual propagation have distorted a routine message into something seemingly urgent or garbled parts of it beyond recognition? Operators were trained to filter out noise, but an unusual pattern, coinciding with later known events, might be retrospectively interpreted as significant. Was it a case of pattern seeking after the fact, or did an operator somewhere hear something truly anomalous and dismiss it? If you've ever experienced a moment where hindsight cast a shadow on a seemingly insignificant detail, you understand the unsettling feeling. What strange coincidences have you observed that later seemed like warnings? Share your thoughts below. We must also confront the human element. Jack Phillips, the chief operator, was tragically lost in the sinking. Harold Bride survived but endured immense physical and emotional trauma. Their testimonies were crucial, but memory under duress is fallible. Could Phillips, in the hours before the collision, exhausted and stressed, have sent or received something unusual that Bride was unaware of, or that Phillips himself didn't fully register until it was too late? The pressure to maintain commercial traffic, the rebuff from the Californian's operator, these factors created an environment where a non-standard or low-priority signal might easily be ignored or postponed. Furthermore, the Marconi company itself had a vested interest in portraying its technology and operators in the best possible light during the inquiries. Acknowledging a missed or misinterpreted warning signal, especially one sent before the official distress calls, could have been damaging. While there's no concrete evidence of a cover-up regarding this specific alleged signal, the context of corporate reputation and liability cannot be entirely dismissed when evaluating why such a story might remain on the fringes, absent from official accounts. The narrative of heroism and tragedy was already complex. Adding a layer of potentially ignored pre-warning complicates it significantly. The search for this signal often leads to apocryphal stories, third-hand accounts passed down through families of wireless operators or sailors from that era. Fragments of logs from long decommissioned ships, mentions in obscure memoirs. Each clue is tantalizing, yet maddeningly difficult to verify. It's like chasing a ghost in the machine, an electronic echo that refuses to fade completely. Did this omen truly exist, a final, desperate pulse from the heart of the Titanic before the acknowledged disaster began? Or is it a legend born of grief and the human need to find meaning, to find a warning, in the face of overwhelming tragedy? The answer may lie hidden, not in the official logs, but perhaps in the very nature of the disaster that followed, and the desperate actions taken as the ship began its final plunge. If this enigmatic signal was indeed transmitted, its failure to be received, logged, or acted upon represents more than just a technical footnote. It becomes a tragic what-if of history. Imagine the difference even a slight course correction, made hours earlier, could have made. The Titanic was racing through a known ice field, pushing its speed to make headlines upon arrival in New York. Multiple ships throughout that very day, the Coronia, the Nordam, the Baltic, the America, the Masaba, and most crucially, the nearby Californian, had sent warnings of ice, large icebergs, and field ice directly in or near the Titanic's path. Yet, these warnings faced a perilous journey from the wireless room to the bridge. Some were delayed by the operators prioritizing passenger traffic. Some were relayed, but perhaps didn't convey the full urgency or precise location effectively. The warning from the Mesaba, detailing heavy pack ice and large bergs, tragically never even reached Captain Smith or his officers on the bridge. It was simply filed away. The final, most direct warning from the Californian, reporting being stopped and surrounded by ice just miles away, was the one famously met with Phillips's exhausted and sharp rebuke. "Shut up. Shut up. I am busy. I am working Cape Race." Moments later, the Californian's operator switched off his set for the night. Communication lines were failing long before the hull was breached. Now, introduce into this documented chaos the possibility of another, non-standard warning, the phantom signal we've been exploring. If it existed, it was entering an environment already saturated with disregarded information. Would it have even registered? Or would it have been dismissed as yet more static, another distraction for the overwhelmed operators? This potential signal becomes less an isolated event and more a symbol of the systemic failures and complacency that contributed to the disaster. It embodies the ignored whispers, the disregarded signs, the growing sense of unease that should have permeated the ship, but didn't. Picture the bridge officers, Lightoller, Murdoch, Moody, scanning the horizon, relying on the keen eyesight of lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee in the Crow's Nest, perched high above the deck, straining their eyes in the freezing, moonless darkness. They had no binoculars, a seemingly small detail, yet one endlessly debated in the inquiries. They knew there was ice out there, but the specific, critical warnings hadn't reached them with the force required to significantly alter course or speed. They were operating under the assumption that any iceberg would be spotted in time to maneuver the massive liner away, an assumption based on normal conditions, not on the flat calm sea that failed to create telltale waves breaking at the iceberg's base, nor the unusually dark night. Down below, in the warmth and light, passengers danced, dined, and socialized. The ship felt immense, stable, invincible. The faint thrum of the engines was a lullaby, not a harbinger of doom. If that forgotten signal truly crackled through the ether hours earlier, its unheard plea forms a haunting counterpoint to the gaiety and confidence aboard the ship, a ghost of warning, trying to pierce the veil of blissful ignorance. The contrast is chilling. The unseen, unheard electronic voice warning of imminent danger versus the tangible reality of thousands enjoying the pinnacle of luxury, utterly oblivious. Then, at 11:40 p.m. ship's time, the moment arrived. Lookout Frederick Fleet saw it, a shade darker than the darkness ahead. Iceberg right ahead. The warning bell rang. The telephone call to the bridge was made. First Officer Murdoch ordered hard a starboard. Through the engine telegraphs to stop. Then full astern. But the Titanic was too large, moving too fast. The turning maneuver was agonizingly slow. The iceberg, a colossal mass of ancient ice, scraped along the starboard side, below the waterline. Not a dramatic head-on collision, but a series of gashes and punctures across roughly 300 feet of the hull, breaching 6 watertight compartments. More than the ship was designed to withstand. Many passengers barely felt the impact. A slight shudder, a gentle jar. Some thought the ship had merely dropped a propeller blade. Others, closer to the point of impact, heard a grinding noise or felt a more distinct bump. Few initially grasped the severity, but down below, in the boiler rooms and mail room, the truth was immediate and terrifying as icy seawater surged in. The Omen, whether a real signal or simply the culmination of ignored warnings, had been fulfilled. The unsinkable ship had suffered a mortal wound. If you have followed the trail of this forgotten signal this far, navigating the warnings and the circumstances of that night, comment "unanswered Omen" below. The silence that followed that alleged signal was about to be broken by a far more desperate and tragically acknowledged series of calls. The final act was beginning. As the icy water relentlessly climbed the decks of the Titanic, the initial disbelief turned to chilling certainty. Thomas Andrews, the ship's brilliant designer, confirmed the grim prognosis to Captain Smith. The damage was too extensive. The ship was doomed. The order was given: get the lifeboats out. What followed was a descent into organized chaos, punctuated by acts of heroism and moments of sheer terror. The mandate of women and children first echoed across the tilting decks, but confusion, the inadequate number of lifeboats, and the sheer scale of the unfolding disaster meant many boats were launched partially empty. Meanwhile, in the Marconi wireless room, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride began their now legendary transmission of distress signals. First, the traditional CQD. Then, at Bride's suggestion, the newer SOS, used intermittently. CQD, CQD, SOS, SOS, MGY, MGY. Sinking fast, position 41.46 and 50.14 W. Unlike the alleged earlier Omen, these calls were heard. The SS Carpathia, commanded by Arthur Rostron, received the plea from over 58 miles away and immediately diverted, racing at full speed through the same dangerous ice field, pushing her engines to their absolute limit in a desperate bid to reach the stricken liner. Other ships also heard the calls: the Olympic, the Baltic, the Frankfurt, the Mount Temple, but they were too far away or, like the nearby Californian, remained inexplicably unresponsive until it was far too late. Imagine the scene in that wireless room as the ship listed further and further. Water swirling around their ankles, the power fading. Phillips and Bride continued to transmit, relaying updated positions, urging rescuers onward. Their dedication was undeniable, heroic. Yet, the question hangs heavy in the air. Could an earlier, different kind of warning, perhaps the very phantom signal we've pondered, have alerted ships like the Californian before its operator went off duty? Could have painted a picture of mounting danger rather than sudden catastrophe, prompting investigation instead of dismissal? We will likely never know for sure. The fractured accounts and lack of concrete logs create a veil that time has only thickened. No verifiable record of this specific Omen signal exists in the comprehensive logs collated after the disaster. No ship involved in the rescue efforts reported receiving such a transmission prior to the official CQD. Yet the whispers persist. Could fragments have been caught by amateur enthusiasts far away, or by naval stations monitoring broader frequencies, their significance only guessed at later? Could log entries have been lost, destroyed in the chaos of the sinking itself, or subtly omitted during the inquiries focused solely on the post-collision timeline? The lack of definitive proof doesn't entirely extinguish the unsettling possibility. It forces us to confront the limits of recorded history and the potential for crucial details to slip through the cracks, especially in moments of extreme crisis and emerging technology. What this forgotten signal truly represents, whether factual or legendary, is the chilling embodiment of ignored warnings. The Titanic disaster wasn't just about hitting an iceberg. It was a tragedy compounded by a cascade of communication failures, assumptions, and human errors. The numerous, documented ice warnings that went unheeded are proof enough of a system under strain. The phantom signal, if real, would be the ultimate symbol of this breakdown, a final, desperate whisper before the scream, lost to the noise and indifference of the airwaves. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most critical messages are not the loudest, but the ones we fail to listen for. As the Titanic's bow plunged deeper, the angle grew steeper. The lights flickered and died, plunging the final moments into terrifying darkness, broken only by the stars above and the desperate cries from the water below. The ship's mighty structure groaned under unimaginable stress until, with a series of deafening roars, it broke apart between the third and fourth funnels. The stern section rose almost vertically before beginning its final, 2.5-mile descent to the ocean floor. Phillips did not survive. Bride was washed overboard but managed to reach an overturned lifeboat. The silence that followed the sinking was, according to survivors, even more horrifying than the noise that preceded it. The sound of over 1,500 souls lost in the freezing water. The Carpathia arrived at dawn to find a scattering of lifeboats and a sea of wreckage. The scale of the loss was staggering. The unsinkable ship, the pride of the White Star Line, lay shattered in the abyss. In the aftermath, inquiries were held, regulations were changed, the International Ice Patrol was established, lifeboat requirements were drastically increased, and wireless communication protocols were standardized and prioritized for safety. Lessons were learned, paid for at a terrible price. But the story of the forgotten signal lingers, a haunting what if that challenges the neat narrative of the disaster. It compels us to look beyond the official records, to listen closely to the silences in history, and to question whether we have truly heard the whole story. It reminds us that vigilance requires not just seeing the iceberg, but also listening for the warnings, however faint, however unconventional, that might precede it. The Titanic's final omen might not be found in any logbook, but perhaps it echoes in the deep, a timeless warning about hubris, communication, and the devastating consequences of a message unheard. Thank you for joining us on this exploration into one of history's most profound maritime mysteries. The echoes of the past often carry warnings for the future. If you believe in the importance of uncovering these hidden stories and questioning accepted narratives, consider subscribing and becoming part of our community dedicated to seeking truth. The search never truly ends,